Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, where we look at how news about Taiwan is impacting the world. I'm Betty Chen. This month is LGBT Pride Month, and we also want to look at how trans rights activists around the world are rallying behind their communities in what seems like a global backlash against their advocacies. Earlier this year, both the UK and the US have been rolling out legislation that would limit a transgender person's access to public spaces, or in the case of Florida, even their access to healthcare. Most recently, back in Taiwan, the Constitutional Court had declined to move forward with a case about what is legally required to change one's gender. Against this backdrop of global controversy, we will look at where is trans rights movement headed to in Taiwan. Joining us today, we are very honored to have invited Ms. Pan-Chen Lo, one of the organizers of the annual Trans Pride March in Taiwan. She did her master's dissertation on the topic of gender non-conforming communities in Taiwan. Pan, a warm welcome to our show. Please say hi to our audience.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, Pan. So let's just start with our conversation. In the beginning, I would like to dive in a little bit on the topic or the definition of transgender. So in your understanding, who falls under the umbrella term transgender here in Taiwan?
Generally, trans refers to people who move from their gender assigned at birth. Some move toward the other side, and some go beyond. There are some categories such as cross-dressing or transsexual, and there has also been the development of non-binary identities in Taiwan in the past few years. Some non-binary consider themselves trans, but some do not. And my point is the focus on medical standards for successful transition or being like a real trans has created a monolithic understanding of what being transgender is, and that fails to understand the full diversity of this community.
And my next question, let's go back to the history. When did the term transgender in Taiwan really emerged? And how can we say that people start to accept this kind of identity, transgender, in our society?
So the term itself actually emerged in the end of the 20th century. And before that, in the 80s in Taiwan, there were debates going on sex reassignment surgery, which means to alter one's genitals. And this kind of surgery is legalized at the end of 80. So in the 90s, although trans people could have this kind of surgery, but they still face really strong discrimination in workplaces and governmental departments, and some even committed suicide. So in the late 90s and 2000s, here comes the transgender emergence of transgender this term. And in the beginning, it's not really an identity. It's more like a movement questioning binary gender and seeking acknowledgement of diversity. And I also want to mention that the turn of this 21st century is also the time that feminism and queer activism made headway in Taiwan. That there were three important acts were passed. One is on sexual harassment prevention, and gender equality of employment, and gender equality education. So in this trend, the concept of gender and sexual diversity was also introduced into Taiwan.
So thank you for sharing with us about this important part of history. You talk about discrimination, you talk about people committing suicide because of their gender or their identity. And could you please tell us what have changed for the transgender movement in Taiwan, and what is the most pressing issue for you?
Yeah, and I think after 2000, I think things are going a little bit more kind of like a mainstreaming, and we have two major LGBTQ plus right organization, Hotline and TAP-CPR, and these two groups it's actually, I want to give them credit for doing a lot in recent years. And one is more focused on community support, something like educational resources, and the other one works more on direct advocacy on legislation. And one of that just became kind of like a hotspot is to relax the criteria of changing legal gender identity, especially to remove the surgery as the main requirement.
So you talk about the surgery. So I would like to get your opinion on that, because now in Taiwan, if you're a transgender person and if you're going to change your legal gender on your ID card, it is mandatory that they will have to go through the gender affirming surgery. But not everyone agrees with that. So what is your take on that?
I'm mainly concerned about that, and first is the cost of this kind of surgery. It's not only about money, but time or a quality of your life, of your well-being. And in our social life, it's not necessary for us to alter our genital because we actually we don't need to see them. Yeah, so people are trying to find alternative ways, like if we remove surgery as the main requirement, is there any other requirements should there be for a legal gender change? Like maybe we can use diagnose from psychiatrists, or like we can
Like psychological evaluation, perhaps?
yeah, or just hormone therapy, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that. So now we're going to zoom out a little bit to talk about the global controversies surrounding this important topic. We have seen recently, as mentioned in the very beginning, some movements in the US or in the UK or in the Western world. Also in Taiwan, in the meantime, we have seen some anti-trans movement here. Do you see any similarities or connections between these anti-trans movements?
Yeah, actually, I think they are too similar. I mean, like some cases, actually, that they just don't happen in Taiwan, like the growing up of the transgender youth, or like reversing affirming surgeries, or like sports. I mean, we didn't witness that in Taiwan, but the anti-trans contingent has been sounding this alarm to us. So it's kind of weird, like that doesn't happen here. And this kind of anti-trans discourse and narrative from the global north, like the UK and US, it's been translated and like kind of imported into Taiwan. And the local anti-trans discourse like resembles many of the talking points you will hear in US or UK. Yeah. I think we're still trying to let people know like the diversity of transgender experience, and people really need to understand that there are a wide array of diverse transgender experience, and a medical transition does not define what it means to be trans. Like not everyone wants to pursue medical transition, but just like marriage, like everyone should have access to healthcare and other public service, and turn to the sport, I actually think it's more like an entertaining stuff. I mean, it's not actually a public right as a citizen. So I mean, we really need to go into detail, and we need to invite experts to have a deep investigation on that. And we haven't. I mean, we just started to do some investigation of the basic living constitution condition of trans people right now. So I think we need more time on that to work on this trans advocacy. Yeah.
Indeed, I think you just mentioned a very important word, that is diversity. Well, media plays different roles. Some people may say they're spreading this kind of negative images about trans people, but on the other hand, media also plays a very important role of showing all kinds of people that embrace themselves, their true selves. And through the communication and through the internet, people start to see, oh, actually, we have seen different kinds of people, and I may be just like that. Do you think there is enough public support for the transgender community here in Taiwan?
Definitely there could be more, but again, I want to give credit to the major LGBTQ plus organization I just mentioned, because like Hotline just held a trans march, like the first trans march in Asia since 2019, and this is really a platform for people who are not trans but they are trans inclusive or friendly, for them to express their support toward transgender people. And in this event, you can also see different kind of appearance, different kind of practice of transgender people in this kind of event. So I think it's really important.
So what else can they do, or maybe how can they work with the government to change the, say, dilemmas or difficulties faced by the transgender community?
Actually, many organizations have, as far as I know, they actually maintain a kind of good relationship with government department. Like they will do some like public education for public affairs, and hopefully could do a better service when they're met transgender people, and also I think they need to invite more kind of trans experts and on the policy making. Yeah.
So going back to the root of the problem, I think that one of the reasons why people are scared or maybe people would discriminate is because their lack of education or lack of knowledge. So what do you think the government should do, or what do you think the school should do in terms of the gender education for the public or for our school kids, starting from a young age?
So I just mentioned the gender equity education. The law has been passed at the beginning of the 20th century, but I think maybe we have reached a time like we need to really look back and examine what we actually do at schools, because I don't think we have a really fully understand what actually happened in campus when teachers build up these issues, like how they told our kids. Are they just introduce this category to them? Are they just naming them? Are they just say, oh, you're transgender binary? Or are they really make people to think the issue of like gender inequality? I think there should be more education also on history, so that people can know why we passed this act, what was the core value of this movement, not just to respect something you never heard. Because I think that's probably why we are facing such a backlash right now. But for myself, I'm kind of I think we can still do a lot of sin in this kind of condition. Yeah, we need to bring back history and tell people what really happens in the real world, not just let them see the hate speech or producing hate speech in social media. Yeah.
So thank you very much. And here comes my final question. Where do you see the transgender movement here in Taiwan headed to? What's the next step?
First, I think we already have some good lawyers supporting transgender rights, and there are some cases of past. But I think there should be more. We should educate more, like people working course of lawyers, and also in governmental and public affairs. And also, I hope that Taiwan's trans movement will not be too mired in identity politics. Like we always talk about trans people as like it is a rigid identity. But I think what's more important is we need to pursue a political coalition with other movements, or we need to bring back what we learned from feminism movement, and we need to collaborate with anti-all discrimination movements that I just mentioned earlier. And actually, I think many trans people actually involved in different social movements, such as like migrant workers' rights or transportation safety or the open sourcing movement. So the core is to really, I think it's really to balance between liberation and what it takes to maintain a social order and to bring up the well-being of everyone. It's actually about everyone, not only just about some minorities. It's actually made me to rethinking what's wrong with our system right now. So I think people really should look back and go back to this important thinking. Yeah.
Very well said. We should listen more, and it's all about respect, because at the end of the day, trans rights are also human rights. So I think definitely we need to have the transgender people speaking on their own behalf so that people can get better understanding, and then I think that is how we can move forward as a society together. So thank you so much, Pan. That's all the time we have for today. So this has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. You can find TaiwanPlus on Facebook or Twitter. Stay safe and see you next time.